Hello, thank you so much for clicking on this video. Real quick though, I just have a few short questions. I promise it won't take very long and then we can get right into the zombies. First, did you get those deliverables sorted? You know, the ones you said you'd have ready by EOD? It's okay if not. I guess we could just table those for now, circle back to it on Monday. How about the spreadsheets? Did you put those numbers in? Is your Excel sheet filled out? Wait, did we switch to Teams sheet? Did you transfer the data over there? And wait, sorry, did you send that email? You know, the one marked urgent? How close are we to Friday? Did you submit your pay sheet? The Sunday blues hit yet? What's your vacation time look like? PTO balance? Got your 5 to 9 after your 9 to 5 sorted? Did you submit your pay sheet? Stuff here. PTO balance? Urgent. Fire drill capacity? All hands on deck.
The number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
Alright, sorry to do that. I just had to put you in the right frame of mind to talk about zombies. No, not corporate zombies. I mean movie zombies. The zombie genre. Because I think in this day and age of the relentless upward push of our collective boulder and the capitalist hellscape that we've surrendered to, a lot of us have started asking the age-old question of why? You know, why the fuck do any of the survivors of zombie movies choose to keep surviving instead of, well, you know. And, well, I sort of think that's the whole point of the genre, actually. I think zombie movies are about why we choose to stay alive, despite the, you know, hell around us. Why on earth do we keep living when living, sucks? That's exactly what I want to talk about in today's video. I want to talk about why zombies have always been rooted in the question of existentialism. This is your spoiler warning. Everything on the left will be explicitly spoiled, and everything on the right will be probably spoiled through some of the clips that I'll be showing. And listen, I know that zombies and the topic of zombies was pretty much beaten to death in the early 2010s with The Walking Dead and all of the spin-offs and everything, but I don't think we give the zombie movie genre enough credit for what it actually is. And I think part of that is because it's a facet of the horror genre, which has never really been taken seriously by a mainstream audience anyway. A lot of people think that horror is nothing but blood and guts, the cheapest genre of them all, about as deep as the superficial wounds that our final girl always survives. But I think that's bullshit. I think horror has always been one of the most telling ways to look into a snapshot of what a culture fears, of what a culture is going through. And the zombie movie is no exception. I think that zombie movies are actually a perfect microcosm of that. They've always been a way for a society to explore what's plaguing it. That being said, let me prove it to you. Let's go over the zombie genre and why it is the answer to the capitalist hellscape that we've been abandoned in. Zombie movies and existentialism. So before I can do this, we gotta establish some basics. We've only got 2 players in our zombie movie, so this won't take very long. Let's define a zombie and let's define our survivor. So what is a zombie? Seriously, like, what is a zombie? And I don't mean are they the dead come back to life, are they infected with some mutant strain of rabies, or are they taken over by the cordyceps fungus? I mean, what does a zombie represent? What is at the essence of the concept of a zombie? What is a zombie movie? And I think the answer is actually way simpler than we often give it credit for. Number 1, a zombie isn't alive. Not in any way that matters, at least. This is pretty clear-cut in shows like The Walking Dead or movies like Shaun of the Dead or Night of the Living Dead. Those are dead bodies come back to life. It's the core of what Romero was originally going for. The zombies were slow and stiff because of rigor mortis. They were coming out of the grave. But aren't modern zombies not that? Don't we want our modern zombies to have some realism for some reason? Our modern zombies are still alive. They're infected. They've got some horrible disease that turns them into these rabid monsters. But I don't think that minutia matters to the definition. I think that even modern day zombies that are still alive aren't really living. There's a very marked difference, right, from a zombie and a person. And I think that boiling it down to one being alive and living and one not is kind of the best way to put it. So at the core of this lack of living, these zombies, they don't talk, they don't form relationships, they don't have any goals beyond, well, number 2, their need to consume. This is the other factor in all zombie movies. They eat people. Brains specifically sometimes, but people, right? They eat the living. They consume. It's all they do. It's all they care about is destruction and consumption. They aren't alive, they don't live, yet they consume. But why do they consume? Number 3, what makes a zombie? They infect. Specifically, they infect humans through their drive to consume. They turn the living into zombies until they can achieve their mass goal of, I don't know, everyone being a zombie, I guess. But have you noticed the trend throughout all of this? Zombies are defined by their relation to the living within their film. They can only exist within the context of the survivors. They are defined by being not the survivors, by being the threat to the survivors. So we're talking a lot about them. Let's define what makes a survivor. survivors are still alive. And they want to continue to still be alive. It's pretty basic, right? They're not zombies in our zombie movie. But what else? What else do survivors do time and time again in all zombie media? A few things, I think. Number one, as I said, they continue to survive. Base level hierarchy of needs, live, keep breathing and whatever. Number two, they join up with other survivors. It's not a zombie movie if you don't have a ragtag group of mostly strangers pulled together by circumstance fighting against the hordes outside. Sometimes they're less than strangers, right? But they're almost always people who might not have known each other very well at one point and are now suddenly dependent on each other for survival. After all, if the zombies are grouping up together to kill us, why shouldn't we do the same? Safety in numbers and all that. So, finally, number three, what makes a survivor, is the survivor searches for meaning. This is the true point of most survivors in zombie movies. Our survivors need to find shelter. Okay, now that they've found it, food, guns, water, medicine. Now what? Well, yeah, now what? We're alive, aren't we? Why? Why are we still alive? What's the point of all this fighting? Why did we do all of that? And so we've arrived at the thesis of this video, which is that zombie movies ask us the question of why. Why do we continue to fight? But zombie movies also answer that very question. Zombie media holds up a mirror to us and says, yeah, the world fucking sucks, we know. But you're still here, aren't you? And this is why. This is why it matters, and this is why we suffer. That life is about three things, really: surviving, connection, and meaning. So keep that in mind as we look at the answer of why it is we keep pushing our boulder, no matter how many times it falls.
Why are there that many zombie movies anyway? Is it supposed to be a metaphor for consumerism? Because don't be so pleased with your own, self-reverential cleverness, you know? Some girls like to shop.
Zombies as a metaphor. So now that we've defined our zombie and our survivor, let's talk about zombie media and the zombie movie. Zombie movies have always come alongside moments of great historical change. I know that the genre came following Night of the Living Dead, and the zombie movies and zombie media has probably always existed since then, but I'm talking about the major trends of zombie movies and zombie media. You can always harken these back to moments of great historical change and upset. And this is because zombies have always been used as a way for us to deal with our collective consciousness experiencing this great societal change. I mean, what better way to show the changing world around you than by subjecting a bunch of everymen to some cataclysmic apocalypse? How else do you represent no longer understanding your fellow citizens than by turning your neighbors into ghoulish monsters who are recognizable only in the face that they've stolen? It's a perfect way to make visual moments in history where people have felt lost in their once familiar world. And we've done it time and time again ever since Romero's movie first came out onto the scene. So let's run through a quick list of some zombie films, some zombie trends, and talk about what societal change was going on at the time. And this is in no way meant to be an exhaustive list, just a casual review of the big hitter films that represented the cultural interest in zombies. So let's go in order. Night of the Living Dead in 1968, the one that started it all. This movie came out right on the heels of the civil rights movement in the United States. In the fight for equal rights, a lot of white America was no longer able to live in the ignorance of who their neighbors really were, and how deeply and horribly entrenched racism was in our society. Additionally, this film came following the end of the Cold War. It was a significant time where American citizens no longer had freedom in thought. Not only did they have to fear their neighbor, they had to fear that they too might be accused of being enemies of the state. And what better way to make these fears tangible than by making a monster that looks like your fellow man, but really hungers to eat you and destroy your community? After all, we've destroyed the American family, and you can no longer trust in your neighbor. And at the end of it all, even if you do survive, there's nothing to stop you from being shot dead anyway, especially if you're a black man converged upon by a group of white men toting guns, avenging their small town from the new external threat. So, that being said, let's move on. Dawn of the Dead in 1978. This is Romero's follow-up film to his smash hit Night of the Living Dead. We get a group of survivors converging at a mall of all places as they try to wait out the horror of their new world. In 1978, America was dealing with the aftermath of the Vietnam War, alongside the newly dawning economic structure of Reaganism and the suburban flight out of the cities. The Vietnam War had our soldiers returning home far from the people they once were. They'd seen the horrors abroad, and for the first time, so did the Americans back at home, from the comfort of their very own living room. With the advent of television, Americans could see for themselves what it looked like to be at war. We watched our very own men suffer from atrocities, then turn around and commit those same atrocities. It was a shock to the system to learn who we really were as people and this level of violence that we were actually capable of. This, alongside a historic period of stagflation and record high unemployment, had many Americans wondering if they'd entered into an apocalypse of their own at some point.
Sting!
Why doesn't anybody contact the president? Why is he letting this happen to us?
Americans no longer recognized their fellow neighbors. They no longer had trust in their government. With the continued rise of prices and the horror of war being broadcast right into our homes, both things that were silhouetted against the emergence of the brand new supermall, Americans had to ask themselves who they really were, what they really valued, if they could really ignore the horrors of the world as long as they had things to shop for. And so we have our zombie film, where our characters find refuge from the horror outside within the confines of the supermall. Violence becomes the norm, and most Americans are now brainless bodies, hell-bent on ignoring the horror around them, focused only on consumption. Flashing forward in time, we have 3 more iconic zombie films released in short succession. We have 28 Days Later, Shaun of the Dead, and the remake of the 70s movie Dawn of the Dead. 28 Days Later came out in 2002, and the other 2 came out in 2004. Again, this was following unprecedented economic change. The internet had resulted in the dot-com bubble, which resulted in a sudden economic rise and fall from 1995 to 2002. And the sudden recession following massive economic growth had people reeling. On top of this all, there was, another horrible atrocity that was being broadcast out to all of our living room televisions. 9/11 saw United States passenger planes crashing into the World Trade Center in New York City. The hub for economic trade at what was the financial epicenter of the world at that time. The behemoth skyscrapers that felt infallible proved not to be, killing thousands at the work of only a few people. In response, the United States launched a war on terror, a war on a concept, not a country. Terror had to be rooted out, just like communism had to be rooted out back during the Cold War. And all of a sudden, nobody could trust their fellow neighbor again. It's a perfect backdrop for a film that asks a question of, are you able to do what it takes to survive when the world is falling down around you? The Walking Dead and Zombieland. So these 2 pieces of zombie media came out in 2009 and 2010 respectively, which was during the Great Recession and the end of the Bush era. Once again, economic change bringing on the zombies. Following the start of the Great Recession, we had unemployment skyrocketing. The face of our country became desolate and lonely. Heads of homes were no longer able to provide for their family like they once were, and houses were being foreclosed upon constantly as a result of the predatory lending practices for home loan applicants. The economy had cannibalized itself in the effort for constant growth, and Americans had grown disillusioned and resentful that the government would ever do anything to help them escape out of the new nightmare of their lives. And all of a sudden, we have films and media that idolize the concept of one man against the world, fighting for his family, blood or otherwise. Rick Grimes or Tallahassee, your average American patriot who's going to save the day by kicking ass and taking names. There is no solace to be found in our leaders, and the only way we can get out of this is by loading up our guns and scrubbing our minds with the idea of mercy. Finally, and most recently, we have The Last of Us. The game came out on the heels of the end of the Great Recession, when a lot of previously discussed ideas were still floating around. After all, The Walking Dead was still coming out with new seasons at that time. Still was until only a few years ago. So you could argue that this is really just an extension of that initial wave. But I want to talk about the 2023 television adaptation. The themes explored in the series, while accurate to the games, I think hit home in a new way for a lot of viewers. And I think this is because of, the big thing we all went through together, the COVID-19 pandemic. Talk about a plague, right? Not knowing if your fellow neighbor was following the guidelines, getting vaccinated, lack of answers from the people who were meant to herald us through this, a massive amount of loss and fear, and the constant mystery of when it will all end, if it all will. Suddenly, the show about one man and one girl fighting their way across the country and trusting in each other hits a lot harder. If we're stuck inside with each other in the face of global catastrophe, our only peace coming from the connection we make with each other? And what better way to represent that than with 2 survivors alone in an apocalyptic version of the country that was once home, where the only thing they can rely on is each other? Anyway, the point of all this was to say that we have always used zombies to externalize our societal fear. Zombie movies offer the perfect environment for us to address the changing society around us, and what it means to go on living while everything you once thought to be immutable is different. So how do some zombie movies represent this? They emerge from a horrifying world around them. What sort of hope do they have to offer their viewers? What have they got to say about the tumultuous environment that created them in the first place?
Any zombies out there?
Don't say that.
What?
That. What? That. The Z word. Don't say it.
Why not?
Because it's ridiculous. All right.
Are there any out there, though?
So that being said, let's go movie by movie and analyze how some of our zombie media tackles the question of existentialism and how it uses the characters and the plots to roll forward with the theme of why we stay alive. So we're going to start off with Dawn of the Dead, the 2004 remake by Zack Snyder. In Dawn of the Dead, after our survivors manage to fight off the initial wave of zombies, and after they've come to terms with the new hellscape that they're in, they begin to congregate in a mall of all places. They overthrow the security guards who tried to hoard all the mall supplies to themselves, come to terms with the fact that everyone they know and love is dead, they let in another group of survivors, they learn what makes a zombie.
And then what?
Well, and then they survive. The survivors in Dawn of the Dead are like really set compared to most of the other survivors we'll be talking about in this video. They have shelter, weapons, practically an endless supply of food, clothing, and they even have a nurse in their main character. They don't really need for anything, so they don't really have any big goals. They're stuck inside the mall thanks to a horde of zombies outside that continue to congregate no matter how many celebrity doppelgangers they kill. But in general, they don't really have anything that they need to strive for. They don't really have any sort of outside push motivating them. So what do? Well, it's obvious. They search for meaning. They have sex, they make fancy meals, they make friends, they play chess, they make art, they fall in love, they play basketball, they watch movies, and they even find a cute little dog. But it's not enough. A survivor, a pregnant woman named Luda, who was secretly infected early on, ends up turning and giving birth to a zombie baby. Then, in an unfortunate confrontation, the selfless bus driver who brought in half of the survivors comes across the scene and shoots the zombified Luda, which causes the dad of the baby to shoot her in retaliation. So she shoots him right back, and all of a sudden we're down 3 survivors and everyone has to watch as the nurse shoots the zombie baby. And what does this tell them?
I don't want to die here.
Now, the decision they make to leave is kind of stupid if this were, like, I don't know, real life, but it is thematically important. They decide that their purposeless life of fucking around in a mall is not fulfilling, even if it is surviving. They don't know why they're continuing to live.
Because now I realize that there are some things worse than death, and one of them is sitting here waiting to die.
At the same time as this is happening, across the way they've made a friend named Andy in Andy's gun store. Andy is important to the group at this point because he's an incredible sharpshooter. He has become best friends with the proto-leader of the group.
We have to pick up Andy, he's part of the group.
And also, the store he has is going to have all the guns that they need if they want to survive against the zombies. Andy, at this point, has run out of food. He is beginning to starve. And so they have another motivation, which is that they want to save Andy. So they come up with a plan to save the gunman.
Then we're gonna drive across the ruined city through a welcome committee of a few 100,000 dead cannibals, all so that we can sail off into the sunset on this fucking asshole's boat and head for some island that for all we know doesn't even exist?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they have purpose again. They are seeking meaning in this new life that they've been saddled with. And the person that they've connected to across the way is going to die if they don't intervene. It's a theme that the movie continuously touches upon, the importance of connection and the importance of having meaning in your life.
Is that where you picked them up?
Well, I get this call in the CB from that guy Glenn saying all these folks are in the chapel.
He's a priest?
No, he plays the organ. I was in the neighborhood, so I picked him up.
Well done.
Thanks.
You have to understand that she's lost everyone. Well, she's got.
The movie is telling us why we continue to fight. Up until this point, this movie has been showing us survivors who are stranded in the hellscape of the new world continuing to survive since, well, yeah, what else are they gonna do? And with how horrible their life has become, you really begin to ask yourself, why are they still fighting? What's the point? And so the movie shows us that the survivors are asking themselves that very same question. They don't know why they're continuing to survive and fight for things. They don't understand it either. Because why keep living without a reason to live? When the only still intact family dies, the characters remember what they'd forgotten. The baby, which represented the future, a future after the societal downfall that they're living in, was not safe in the confines of the mall like they believe. They realize that they've become sedentary and purposeless. They consume what remains in the mall until they realize that it is not satiating them. And all they're doing is using what is around them and surviving. So they venture out to seek new purpose, something bigger, something broader. They abandon their comfortable surroundings without meaning in the hope for something better, to find a place that still has a future. Because survival without meaning and without connection isn't really living. It's a risk, and they know that. But if they stay inside this mall and don't try for anything else, then what makes them different from the hordes outside trying to get in and consume them just as they've been consuming the goods of the mall? Malls and consumerism. Alright, how's my costume? Oh my gosh, okay. It's supposed to be Shaun. I didn't have a red tie, so I had to kind of make do, but Shaun at the end of the movie. Anyways. So moving on to a movie that came out the same year, let's talk about Shaun of the Dead. I'm gonna admit I'm a little biased. I think that Shaun of the Dead is a masterpiece. The movie begins with an incredible montage of zombies. Hey, wait a minute, those aren't zombies, those are us. Immediately, the movie is slamming us with the question of who really is a zombie. What makes them different from us? Don't all these people on their phones and dancing and working the cash register look just like zombies? Aren't they just as mindless as zombies? From the get-go, this movie has us questioning if we really all turn to zombies one day, would it look very different from how we already live? And so we're introduced to our title character, Shaun. Shaun is like us. He's 27, he's in a relationship that began in college but hasn't really gone anywhere since. He still lives with his best friend and their other college friend, the one who's maturing perhaps a bit faster than they are. Shaun's in a dead-end job that he hates, where he's the oldest person there, and really all he wants to do is just enjoy a good pint down at the Winchester and fuck around and play video games. You know, the little things in life. Immediately, it's clear that Shaun is stagnant in his life.
Look, I know you don't want to be here forever. You know, I got things I want to do in my life.
When?
His life is going along, but still has yet to really happen. He doesn't really have a lot of, meaning. And this lack of life leads to his girlfriend breaking up with him. His girlfriend, who was really the best part of his life. All of a sudden, the one thing that might have propelled him forward, the biggest connection he had with someone else, the one thing that gave him something to be motivated over, is gone. All that he has left is the lack of life he's led. All he's done now is survive. And then, whoa, zombies. The zombie apocalypse begins in one of the funniest ways that a zombie apocalypse has ever begun on television. And now Shaun must deal with a world where lacking ambition and drive and fight will get you killed. He has to have a motivation now, and it's time for him to step up unless he wants to become one of them. So, what's his plan?
Go to Mum's, kill Phil, grab Liz, go to the Winchester, have a nice cold pint, and wait for all this to blow over.
In doing so, Shaun has something to fight for, something to fight against. And along the way in this plan, one of the first things that Shaun is forced to do is address his fractured relationship with his stepdad, who was bit and is dying in one of the most heartbreaking scenes of the entire movie. His stepdad's final speech to him makes him realize that all he ever wanted was to connect to him and try to be a role model for Shaun to look up to. Shaun has to address the fact that he's refused this connection during his life.
Hey, he's not my dad. Okay, he's my stepdad.
Dad's in the lounge.
He's not my dad.
And in doing so, he has to learn in the importance of allowing people in and allowing himself to connect with other people. But it's something that he's unfortunately forced to only realize until too late, after the zombie apocalypse has already begun and after Phil is already dead. And this moment really emphasizes one of the core themes of zombie movies. What makes us different from the zombies outside? After all, zombies don't mourn. When a horde is coming down on you and you're taking them out one by one, they're not shouting about the fact that you took down their buddy, are they? No, that's something only the living do. When Shaun finally allows himself to connect with his stepfather, even though it's too late, it represents one of the biggest moments of growth for him.
We can't just leave your dad!
He's not my dad!
Oh, Shaun!
Mum, he was, but he's not anymore.
He is no longer more similar to the zombies outside by means of his refusal to connect with the people who wanted to know him. He realizes his mistake in abandoning those relationships for so long. He is showing us that one of the core components of humanity, of what makes us different from the zombies knocking at our door, it's our ability to love. Another way you can see how Edgar Wright wanted to really highlight the difference between Shaun pre-understanding of this lack of connection and post-understanding of his lack of connection was the idea he had of how he was going to kill Phil in the original plan versus how it actually went down. Instead of a callous moment that's just one stop along the way, it's a moment where he is truly having to deal with the pain of rejecting the connection with his stepdad for so long. So after this heartbreaking moment for him, we still have to go back to the plan. He still has other people who are now depending on him.
And then what?
And then our survivors are faced with the failure of their plan and their imminent death. Shaun decides to take action and to risk his own safety for the safety of his group. He is no longer the person for whom life is happening to while he sits idly by. He is now a man of action, willing to take risks for the sake of his people. Meaning, connection. And it's compared against his foil, David, who's always looked down upon Shaun pre-apocalypse. When the world ended, David isn't the character who is stepping up for the good of the group. He's someone who is panicking, too worried about how he is coming across and the truth of the situation of what they're dealing with. More members of our crew die, including Shaun's mom, Shaun's foil, and, of course, heartbreakingly, Shaun's best friend. And then we get to the real vital moment of this movie. Our remaining survivors, Shaun, Liz, and his best friend, who's now been bit, are trapped in the cellar of the Winchester. Shaun's only got 2 bullets left. So what do? They've lost their connection, zombies are banging at the door, and all hope they have is lost. They've got no chance of surviving. So do they, no. They turn around, they walk back down that hill and decide to push the boulder up one more time because they find one final opening out of there. They find an elevator that will bring them up into the unknown with no idea what's going to be waiting for them on the other side. When faced with the question of where they'll go from here and the option to, give up or to keep going despite not knowing what will come, and after having to deal with so much loss, they choose the option of not knowing what's going to come but doing it anyway. Because life to them is worth it. The connections are worth it. The search for meaning is worth it. They've still got each other and they've still got a chance. They're not going to give up. And they're rewarded for this. The army comes in, mows down the dead, and Shaun and Liz survive. And how does it end? Well, hilariously, but also Shaun and Liz are now living together. They watch programs on the TV, just like Shaun did before with Ed. And this is where I think one of the most telling moments happens, because if you were looking at this just broadly, it would almost look like Shaun's learned nothing, right? He's doing exactly the same thing as he was doing before. He's sitting on the couch, watching the telly. Yeah, it's Liz now instead of Ed, but does it really look any different? Yes, it does, because that's not the point. What he's doing isn't what matters. What matters is that Shaun has learned something. He's learned the most important lesson of it all. We don't know if Shaun got a new job after this. We don't know if he still has pints down at the Winchester, because those weren't the issues of Shaun's life in the first place. The issues with Shaun's life in the first place were that Shaun was doing these things mindlessly. He played video games mindlessly. He spent time with his friends mindlessly. And he went through life and his relationship without ever considering how much it really meant to him. But now we have this Shaun who survived the apocalypse, who chose to go up that elevator into the unknown. This Shaun will never again enjoy the life he leads mindlessly. It's not like he got some $1 million check or some fancy new job or some new position of leadership. In all likelihood, it looks like he leads pretty much the same life and he does the same things as he did before. But now he's finally learned what was important about all of it. He learned that life is about appreciating what you have, being willing to connect, to be happy with the lot you're given. It is in valuing the ones you love and letting them into your lives. He might be leading the same life as he was in the beginning in terms of actions, but he's actually living it now. He's living with Liz. He's valuing what matters. He realized that he isn't dead. He isn't one of those zombies outside. He's still alive, and how wonderful that is.
Care to pay your respects?
Holy crap! You are creepy as shit, sneaking up on me wearing that collar with that freaky ass smile.
My apologies.
We're gonna see how long I can do this before I lose my mind about not being able to properly read my script. Serious business over here. Gotta maintain. I feel like I need to take this off, and I can't take myself seriously wearing this. Okay. It's just, I don't have like a regular size band-aid, so it's just so big. I can't, and I also had this, this is just like completely random. My mom sent me this in a box. It's from when I was a kid. But it is a sheriff's badge, so it came in handy. Pretty well. I was kind of lucky, and this hat is just not accurate, but it's the best I could do. Anyways, okay. Let's talk about The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead is a TV show that came out in 2010 based on a comic by the same name. This is the zombie show of all zombie media.
Hot diggity dog! This place is magnificent.
The Walking Dead has issues, complications, if you will, but I'm not going to talk about that today. If you really do want to hear about that and how badly The Walking Dead AMC fucked over Frank Darabont, the original creator of the first season, then I recommend going over to Wendigoon's channel. He has an iceberg video that really breaks a lot of it down in a really great way, and I don't have time for that today, but I do think it's really important if you want to understand what happened with this show and some of the deeper behind the scenes things about it. Also, I forgot to mention Friendly Space Ninja has a really good one too. No, what I'm going to talk about today is a recurring theme that continues to pop up throughout the entirety of the show. The question of, well, I think you can guess at this point, the question of why it is we choose to keep on surviving. Let's talk about Rick.
Who are you? Rick Grimes. Rick Grimes?
So, Rick begins the show with one of the clearest motivations of any character in most of the zombie media. Find wife, find Carl. He wants to find his family. For those of you that don't know, the show begins with Rick waking up out of a coma, something that is very easily compared to another piece of zombie media. But he wakes up out of a coma to the end of the world. Everything is chaos around him, the dead are back to life, and Lori and Carl are gone. So, what does he do? He gets a horse brutally murdered about it, traps himself in a tank, then gets rescued by one of the most iconic characters in TV history.
Hey, you. Dumbass.
And then what? And then he makes it back to their camp. And he does it. He finds Lori, he finds Carl in this heartwarming scene of reconnection. They're still alive. They've made it, despite the hell around them. And then what?
And then what?
Well, that's kind of the whole point, right? What does Rick do now that he has his family? Of course, he has the motivation of continuing to survive, but what else? What does this show continue to talk about throughout the rest of its run? So I think that the theme of this show is really explored in the season finale of the first season, which is when the group convenes at the CDC. So at the end of the first season, we get one of the most important conflicts that will go on to shape the rest of the show. Let's set the scene. Rick and friends just suffered some pretty brutal casualties at the quarry. It's no longer safe for them there, and they don't know where to go and they don't know what to do. Our survivors have to face the new world they're in. So they go to the only place they can think of that might have answers for the plague going on around them, the CDC. They arrive there, beg to be let in, and finally Dr. Jenner lets them in. They get a hot shower, they get a nice meal, Carl tries his first sip of alcohol. For a moment, our characters are living again, not just surviving. It's a flashback to the world that they once knew. An eye in the middle of a hurricane. An eye. But that's when they find out the rub of it all. The CDC is set to self-destruct due to a lack of fuel to keep it going, and it's going to kill everyone inside in only about half an hour. It will kill them quickly in one giant explosion, but it will kill all of them. So our survivors beg Dr. Jenner to let them out. Notably, Rick brings this up while he's begging.
That's all we want. A choice. A chance.
Let us keep trying as long as we can.
And finally, after all this begging and pleading, Dr. Jenner opens the door. And now our survivors have a choice. Do they return out to the light of day, or do they stay behind and suffer a painless death? It might remind you of another movie where survivors faced a similar choice. Do Shaun and Liz go out into the light of day, the elevator that will take them into the unknown? Does Rick and his group stay behind to suffer a painless death, or do they go out back into the unknown? So Jackie and Andrea are the ones who choose to stay with Dr. Jenner. But another character, Dale, doesn't let Andrea. And he says that if she's going to go, he's going to go with her, which is an interesting kind of parallel of using the meaning of connection to remind her why she's still alive. But Jackie and Dr. Jenner die in the explosion. Right before the rest of our survivors go on, Rick tells Dr. Jenner how grateful he is. And that's when Dr. Jenner delivers one of the coldest lines in the entire series.
I'm grateful.
The day will come when you won't be.
So Dr. Jenner here, his character represents the question of what is the point? Why do we keep on living when life is only suffering?
You know what's out there. A short, brutal life and an agonizing death. There is no hope. There never was.
But Rick and the survivors represent what the show is trying to say, and what the show continues to tell us for the rest of its run.
But I want to believe there's hope. That together, there's hope.
Your chance at forming connections with other people and your chance to find meaning, these are the reasons why we keep living. Why we're grateful to still be alive. Our humanity is why we live, and it's why we keep on trying. So then some other things happen. They go out onto a farm. Our iconic character, Glenn, gets laid, yada yada yada. But I'm more interested in the next parts and what happens in the following season. So at the end of the second season, the farm gets overrun. Our group of survivors look a little bit different, but I want to direct you to the end scene we've got, where once again at the end of the season we are really barreling through this thematic point. Our survivors have officially been forced to deal with the threat of the zombies, the threat of external players, and now also the threat of internal players. Our survivors truly understand the horror of the new world that they're living in. At this point, everyone has lost something. This is no longer the world they once knew, and they've lost the delusion that it'll ever go back to that world. So, what do? You get Dictator Rick. Ricktator, if you will, as I'm going to be calling him for the rest of this moment in the series. Our Ricktator tells them quite clearly that
this isn't a democracy anymore.
This isn't an easy life anymore. They're all gonna shut up and listen to him, or they can pack their bags and get going.
You can do better. Let's see how far you get.
If they want to survive, then they've got to listen to whatever Ricktator says to do. So what do? They shut the fuck up and they listen to Ricktator. And that's how our next season begins. We join our survivors after what has clearly been a harrowing winter. They've become a militarized group. They have rules of engagement, and they explicitly say that they've been circling the same houses looking for food all winter. It's been miserable and exhausting, and not a single character looks happy. We start to see the cracks and the issues with how the group is currently surviving, and the fact that they are only surviving. They are no longer living.
8 months on the road, moving place to place, scavenging, living in a meat locker.
That was no life.
You know, we get this whole moment in the beginning where Carl finds dog food in one of the houses that they're looting, and he brings it to the group and he starts going to put it on the plates. But Rick Tater is not about that, and so he grabs the dog food and he slams it into the fireplace. This is supposed to show that the characters are currently balancing on the precipice of, are they still humans? Do they still have their humanity, or have they really sunk that low? And because zombie media is defined by the zombie versus the survivor, any straying from their humanity brings them closer to the zombified hordes outside. They are more similar to the zombies than they are to humans, than they are to the people they're supposed to be. And the first sign of hope that they get is when they find a prison, which they proceed to clear out so that they can move into. And it's something that I think is briefly touched upon verbally within the show.
Will you sleep in this house?
I found keys on some guards. Daryl has a set too.
I ain't sleeping in no cage. I'll take the perch.
But it is a really good metaphor for what their lives have become. Their first sign of hope is locking themselves in a prison. You know, the kind of place that's supposed to represent the loss of freedom in our everyday lives. Once inside the prison, they refuse to allow in the new survivors of the other prisoners. They refuse to connect. Their desperation to survive has brought them back down in the hierarchy of needs. They need to find shelter and food. They don't have time to gamble on new strangers with Axel and Oscar. But then, well, this works for them, right? This is what they need to do to survive? No, not quite. Because due to Rick's whole don't let anyone else in mindset, technically, Lori dies. Lori, remember the whole point of Rick's original motivation? She dies giving birth because the prison being overrun has separated her from the only person who could have maybe successfully performed a C-section on her. So that we have now is that Rick has lost half of his original motivation, and he loses her while he's been Rick Tater. It's heartbreaking. And it happens also right when they had finally managed to find a way to survive. They have food, they have shelter. This should be when the characters are readjusting to their hierarchy of needs. They should be going back to point 2, to reaching out. When this other group of survivors comes in later, including the best character of the show, Tyrese, a group of survivors that we know from the future seasons will be essential to Rick, Rick Tater is still so overcome with grief and the role he's taken on that he has forgotten the whole point of why they're living in the first place. He refused to connect with Lori as Rick Tater, and so he's forced to reckon with the fact that just surviving isn't living. But unfortunately, Rick Tater hasn't really quite gotten that lesson yet, so he refuses the connection he could get with Tyrese and Sasha's group, kicks them out, and leads them to joining his enemy in rise, the governor. And that's where our other survivors, Herschel specifically, are trying to tell Rick that he's wrong. He's lost the point, if you will. Yes, they're surviving, but they're no longer living. And I think this point gets really well expanded on in the 4th season. After Herschel dies and the prison gets raided, we get a lovely flashback to a time where they're at peace. Herschel is telling Rick the importance of farming, telling him that he needs to look after his son, Carl, especially now that Lori is gone. He needs to be there for him and to teach him the things that aren't just about killing and fighting to live.
He needs his father. He needs his father to show him the way.
Herschel is making the point that while Rick is a Rick Tater, he is no longer instilling the importance of what it means to be alive into Carl.
He can shoot. We know that. What's his life going to be? What's yours?
So therefore, he needs to teach Carl how to garden, which on its surface might seem, antithetical to their goals. Farming, yes, it's important, it'll get them food, but it's not exactly teaching Carl how to fight and defend himself. But that's not the point. The point is that Carl doesn't know how to look for meaning in life anymore. He's only found meaning in his ability to continue to survive. So Herschel is telling Rick that he needs to remind Carl what it actually means to be a human. It's why they have this repeated refrain of
It'll just get in the way.
in regards to their guns. Their guns which have represented survival. Their guns getting in the way of gardening, which now is representing living. It's supposed to represent the fact that if all they care about is survival, then it'll just get in the way of truly living.
It'll just get in the way.
Carl and Rick both need to remember the point of why they're even doing this. They need to remember that it's for the connection they have with each other. Yes, it's gardening, but it's more than that. It's something that isn't rooted in death and fighting to stay alive. It's slow and it's calm. It's about bringing something to life with your hands through slow, steady, meticulous work. This flashback initially happened when Rick's group took in the survivors from the governor's parish. Massive amount of people that Rick didn't know, which is a stark contrast to how he treated other survivors who were trying to join up with them earlier in the season. So here we have a Rick who is willing to connect again. Now we have a Rick who also needs to find meaning again. The significance of this occurring alongside Rick taking in the group of survivors shows us that connection was the point. Community was the point of why they keep living. Was this a risk? Yes, because those survivors do eventually allow for a mass outbreak of illness, but that's not what matters. What matters is living, not just surviving. What matters is choosing to continue to make connections, even when those connections will put you at risk. It's a theme that gets explored throughout the entire series, but I think it's best played out in this extremely simple exchange.
Because this is how we survive. We tell ourselves that we are the walking dead. Lay down. Lay down.
This exchange happens right as Rick's group has to decide whether or not to take a chance by going with Aaron, a mysterious stranger who's trying to offer them sanctuary in this seemingly too perfect concept of Alexandria. At this point, our survivors have been through even more hell. They've lost people. They've had to fight their way out of a group that literally wanted to eat them. And now we have someone coming along saying, no, we promise, our group is good. Take the chance and come back with us to Alexandria. Look, we have photos. Our town, it has borders and farms and electricity and all of it self-sustaining. This is all something that should be too good to be true in their new hellscape. So Rick has to ask himself, does he take the chance for something better? Does he turn around and go back down that hill and push that boulder up again, even if he knows in this new world it will inevitably fall? Does he take the elevator up to go into the unknown just for the chance of something better? Does he leave the CDC? Of course he does. The group goes with Aaron to Alexandria. And of course it isn't perfect, and of course the day comes where Rick isn't thankful that Dr. Jenner let them survive. But that's not what matters. The boulder will always fall again. What matters is the choice to go back down that hill and to push it up again.
Now I can make these people feel better and hang on a little bit longer. I can save lives. That's reason enough to risk mine.
You got any questions for us?
No. Doesn't matter who you are.
Really?
Yeah. Doesn't matter.
You were like a giant, cock-blocking robot, like developed in a secret fucking government lab.
Hey. I bet you had no idea when you clicked on this video what high level of costume production this was going to be. I'm Tallahassee, kinda. I'm using the same hat, but no sheriff this time, because Tallahassee, not a sheriff. Let's skip forward in time again. Not so much forward in time. Zombieland came out in 2009, which I think is technically backwards in time for when The Walking Dead came out. Anyways, Zombieland. Continuing on with our Great Recession zombie films, let's go back to something a little bit lighter. So strap in, get your Twinkie, and
Time to nut up or shut up.
one of the most iconic zombie films of all time. Let's talk about Zombieland. Let's talk about our survivors in this movie. As with all zombie movies, we've got a ragtag group of survivors. And each of them epitomize the question we've been asking ourselves. Why do we keep on living? So let's talk about them one by one. Columbus, our main character. Much like Shaun, he lives a life devoid of meaning before the apocalypse. I mean, he says it himself.
I've always been kind of a loner. I avoided other people like they were zombies even before they were zombies. When you're afraid of everything that's out there, you quit going out there.
He had one goal in life, which was to tuck a girl's hair behind her ear. Let's simplify this by saying he wanted to fall in love. Clearly wasn't doing it with all of his Code Red Mountain Dew and video games. So, once again, he's surviving but not really living. Then we've got Tallahassee. Tallahassee is an ass-kicking business.
And business is good.
Tallahassee also has one goal in life. Other than, you know, killing zombies. He wants a Twinkie. Then we have Wichita and Little Rock. Their one goal in life? Stay with each other, keep each other alive, but also,
I'm going to Pacific Playland! Woo!
Go to Pacific Playland. So, together, these characters are introduced as the type to never band up. Columbus has his rules in life. They're strict and they're what keep him alive in this new hell.
But I had the advantage of never having any friends or any close family. I survive because I play it safe and follow the rules.
Tallahassee is too badass to need anybody.
Here's the deal, Columbus. I'm not easy to get along with, and I'm sensing you're a bit of a bitch. So,
Wichita and Little Rock feel like they can only trust each other.
What's our rule?
Trust no one, just you and me.
Just you and me.
But what do anyways? They band up, because of course they do. We learn a little bit more about our survivors in the process. We learn that Tallahassee has a sad backstory of his own, that zombies killed his son, leaving him all alone in this new world. He lost his connection and his meaning right at the onset. We also learn that Wichita and Little Rock have been in the scamming business since before the world even ended. And we learned that Columbus's family is all dead and leveled back already in Columbus, Ohio, which was his other goal in the new hellscape, was to get there. These survivors either came from a life already lacking meaning, a life where they're forced to only survive, or they lost the one thing that gave them meaning at the onset of the apocalypse. And the kicker is that none of them realize that they're still searching for meaning. It isn't until they've already banded up and began learning from each other that meaning is revealed. Wichita and Little Rock learned the importance of trusting other people when Tallahassee and Columbus saved them from their ill-guided attempt to regain the lives they lost with the apocalypse. Tallahassee gains a new family in place of the one he lost, which is represented when Wichita finds the last Twinkie in existence and gives it to Tallahassee. Most importantly, Columbus learns to enjoy the little things. And it's this lesson, this rule that Columbus adds to his list of rules for survival that encapsulates the entirety of the genre. Tallahassee's rule.
Gotta enjoy the little things.
You've got to enjoy playing chess with your neighbor across the way. You've got to enjoy having a pint down at the Winchester and playing video games with your best friend. You've got to enjoy gardening, the slow monotony of a summer's day, and the people who were once strangers. You've got to enjoy the little things. It's the meaning of this. Why our survivors keep on surviving, even in the face of unrelenting doom and pain and anguish. Because there is meaning and value in the little things. It is what makes them different from zombies. It's what makes us different from zombies, from the corporate zombies we're expected to be. Our capacity to enjoy the little things and to connect with each other are why we are still alive.
Rule number 32. Enjoy the little things. Tallahassee got his Twinkie. And even though life would never be simple or innocent again, as he savored that spongy yellow log of cream, we had hope. We had each other. And without other people, well, you might as well be a zombie.
Okay, my Ellie costume. Let's get really sad about it now. This is the final movie I'm going to go over in today's video, and to finish this off, I would like to talk about The Last of Us, a more recent zombie media. Now, for those of you that don't know, let me give you a quick rundown. Joel Miller begins the apocalypse with his brother and his daughter. They've got no idea what the fuck is going on, except that the world has gone to hell and they need to survive. Then, in one of the most heartbreaking scenes of all time, on the eve of the new world, Joel's daughter dies. He goes through hell that night only for it to be stopped by one single soldier at the very end.
And then what?
So what does Joel have left? Flash forward 20 years. Despite Joel's loss of the only thing he really seemed to care about, he's still kicking. He's surviving. Our once selfless character has become the embodiment of the lone wolf. He's a mercenary. It's hinted that he's done horrible things for money, and he doesn't really give a fuck about anyone. Yeah, he has this woman that he fucks occasionally, but doesn't seem particularly interested in establishing some sort of official relationship with her.
I never asked you for anything not to feel the way I felt.
He's very closed off. Enter Ellie. Ellie is a kid. She doesn't remember a time before the apocalypse. And Ellie is immune. Ellie is the key to ending this horrible devastation, as long as Joel can get her to the mysterious non-governmental group, the Fireflies. So Joel takes the mission, / is begged to take the mission by the dying words of the woman he was refusing to admit he loves, refusing connection with.
You get her there. You keep her alive. And you set everything right. All the shit we did. Please say yes, Joel. Please.
He and Ellie engage on a cross-country road trip. And through the course of that road trip, Joel begins to see life through Ellie's eyes. Ellie's eyes that find marvel in stupid jokes.
What is the leading cause of divorce in long-term marriages? A stalemate.
That's awful.
You're awful.
And questioning the movies of a life she never knew, since she was born already in the apocalypse. And what does Joel learn to do? He learns to let Ellie in. He learns that abandoning life for the sake of survival isn't really living. It doesn't make him any different from the enemies they're up against. He learns to enjoy the little things. So in the end, when it comes down to it, and the only hope for a cure is in killing Ellie, the person who he finally let in after all these years, and who he loves as his own daughter, of course he's going to stop that. He's finally found meaning again, meaning in Ellie, and if killing her means a chance at the whole world surviving, it's a chance he's not willing to take, because taking that chance would mean giving up the living he's finally accepted, giving up the reason for which he still lives. Now, the reason I'm only kind of briefly going over the main story in this is because there's another video essay that I think did this really well. It really delved into the whole game, and I think it came out before the show. I'm pretty sure it did. And I really recommend watching it if you want to get a deeper take. If you're, for example, if you're already a fan of either the television show or the video game, I really recommend that video. But what I really want to talk about is episode 3, because this is the hour-long episode that, holy shit, right? I mean, oh my god, it blew my mind. I sobbed for hours after it finished. It really got me. And this episode is the epitome, the hour-long epitome of what I've been trying to say this entire video. This is the boiled down truth of all of it. So this episode is not about Ellie and Joel. This episode is about 2 completely different characters. Enter Bill. Bill knows how to survive. He was a prepper in his old life, and the apocalypse is nothing to him. He was ready for this. He was born ready. He waits for everyone to fuck off out of his town, and then he proceeds to do everything right. He fortifies his town, he farms, he makes himself nice dinners, he drinks wine. Bill isn't just surviving. He's earning a fucking Olympic medal in it. He's the kind of person who was made for this world. He should be so happy. Right? Of course not. If you've been paying attention, of course not. He's surviving. He's not living. Because yeah, he's surviving, and he's surviving really well, but is he living? Enter Frank. Frank is not a survivor. Well, he is in the sense that he's still alive, but he's not a very good one.
Why did you take that long to answer?
I don't know. I thought about lying for some reason, but the reason didn't come.
He gets caught in one of Bill's traps. He's starving, he hasn't eaten in days, the rest of his group died, and Bill should probably kill him, because at worst this man could kill Bill himself, or at best he's just another useless mouth to feed. Isn't that right? But then Frank reminds him of the reason why we all stay alive in the first place.
Love's wounds unseen. That's what someone told me. But I don't know what it means.
He becomes someone worth dying for. They fall in love. They've reached out to other people, Joel and Tess. Bill learns to let people inside, how to make connections.
We're gonna make friends. And we will invite them to visit.
We don't have friends, Frank. We will never have friends because there are no friends to be had.
I've actually been talking to a nice woman on the radio.
You what?
He learns to enjoy the little things, like a nice glass of wine, the sound of the piano, strawberries. And then he proceeds to have one perfect day. He learns that life is about more than just the fortifications he's built to keep the enemies out. He learns that life is about making connections and building bridges.
I was never afraid before you showed up.
He wasn't afraid before Frank showed up because he wasn't really living until Frank showed up. You don't have to fear losing anything if you don't have anything to lose in the first place. Without connection, he wasn't really alive. And in the heartbreaking end of this episode, we flash forward to where Frank is dying the death of a degenerative disease, the kind that couldn't have even been fixed in the world before. They're elderly, they've lived a short life together but a meaningful one, with each other. They found meaning in each other. And so when Frank decides he's had enough, he's lived and he's grateful for it, he tells Bill this. He tells Bill it's the end. He's going to die at the end of the day.
Then you will crush all of these up, put them in my wine. I will drink it. Then you will take me by my hand, bring me to our bed, and I will fall asleep in your arms.
And what does Bill do? He gives him one perfect final day. And he decides that it's the end for him too. Because Bill found the meaning of life in Frank. He found the meaning of life in connection and in hope and in enjoying the little things. And when the dominoes fell, Bill realized that there's no point in surviving without the one he loved. He was close enough to the end anyway, and he's already found his meaning in life. To continue to survive after that would be redundant.
This isn't the tragic suicide at the end of the play. I'm old. I'm satisfied. And you were my purpose.
And having achieved meaning together, they die together too.
All right, gay.
Depressing. Anyway.
When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
Conclusion. So we've taken apart 5 instances of zombie media to ask ourselves the question, why do any of these survivors choose to keep on living? If the world around them is hell, why the fuck are they still trying? Why is it so important to keep on living when living is hell? Well, it's because living is hell. I've been alluding to it the entire time, but let me bring it to the forefront. The myth of Sisyphus tells us of a man condemned by the gods to spend eternity pushing a boulder up a hill only for it to fall when it finally reaches the top. A painful life of constant toil. It sounds only, on first inspection, like the depressing metaphor for what life is. A constant attempt at something better, only for it to always all go wrong in the end. The prisons always get overrun, the zombies break through our defenses, people fuck up your perfect plans. But it doesn't matter, because that's not the point of the myth. The point of the myth is when Sisyphus stands at the top of that mountain, watching the boulder fall back down, and decides, despite it all, despite the futility of what's to come, to turn around and try again anyways. To keep going and to push that boulder up one more time. Because the meaning of life isn't getting the boulder to the top of the mountain. The meaning is in the decision to push the boulder up anyways.
You see a thing like that, you know it's only a matter of time before it's our turn. Nothing's gonna stop it, Boozer. Not a goddamn thing, but do you know why we keep going?
No.
Because what the hell else are we gonna do?
The meaning is in the little things around our survivors. It's in their decision to fight for each other, to reach out and try again, to trust even when it's led them astray in the past, to live for those who cannot, to have hope even when there is none.
How much fuel do we have?
Not much.
All right.
This is what zombie movies are trying to tell us. This is the point of that genre, to ask ourselves what the point of living is, and then to see it clear as day in the first drink we have with a friend, in the simple pleasure of destruction, and enjoying some freshly picked strawberries, and having 2 sugars with your tea like you've always wanted to, and seeing the beauty of a giraffe, and eating 112 ounces of pudding, and finding a new purpose in man's best friend, and believing that you can fall in love again, and in believing there's a better future. You've just got to be around to see it.
So, is it everything you hoped for?
It's got its ups and downs, but you can't deny that view.
So, on that note, thank you all for watching. Tell me what all the zombie movies that I didn't talk about and how upset you are about that in the comments. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and maybe next time I'll talk about how slasher movies show the destruction of the American dream. I'm just kidding. But I really do appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. It's my first video on the channel. I have so many ideas that I do want to go through. I do have a TikTok and I have posted a little bit of analysis on there. Not very much and definitely nowhere near this level of quality. There is like one long series that I made on there that I plan to transfer over. But anyways, yeah, leave comments. If you see this theme emerging in other zombie media, it's really in all of it, you know. The one I didn't have time to talk about, but I think also encapsulates this really well, is the video game Days Gone, and of course the 1970s Dawn of the Dead. But anyways, I would love it if you also wanted to request any sort of genres that you might be interested in. You know, is there a movie or a series that you think would be interesting to break down? And yeah, that's pretty much it. Like and comment, subscribe, I don't really know. Go have a Twinkie tonight, just for me. Or maybe a pint down at the Winchester. It's why these survivors continue to survive, even in the face of unrelenting doom and penguin. Oh, fuck. Unrelenting doom, even in the face of unrelenting doom and pain and anguish. And penguins.